by that, if one doesn't make practice of wrongly, then all one's effort is for nothing, or it's fruitless. All one's effort is fruitless.
장주심도 고라네 파게 고마자 공라이나 다네 대고마되고 다리 진소지부터 돌아fin제 사이에 두고시 무슨 순진 때때 뒤 고쳐게요나 아니 무시디에 된지지는 고쳐로 무시 건데 아니 상제래라고 그랬는데
So therefore, if one then thinks of bodhicitta, if bodhicitta, meditating on bodhicitta is just thinking before one meditates on it, or just thinks of bodhicitta, or before one generates it, before one does for the prayer, for example, so for the benefit of all sentient beings, may I be able to, but through the practice of generosity and so forth, may I attain the enlightened state of Buddha. So if one cites that, then actually it means that one's enlightenment will be very easy.
제자다 갈라오래 전주기심 매나다 되기매버지. 전주심을 다 되기다바나신 책지된 심지에 탐지기든 배 책이 지도하시는 책이 지수 장래 로직이 뭐 텐데 섬지라도 전주심 like 말와. 단 로조 맹인들이 같이 투루도. And
so actually with regard to bodhicitta, so it's not just thinking, may I become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. That is not bodhicitta. It is much more than that. So one really needs to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. But some people misunderstand that as having the wish, just generating the wish, or may I be enlightened, they think they're a bodhisattva. So there's definitely that misunderstanding.
以为自己呢，只要在跟随着文，然后念诵这样子的一种寄诵，那就算是升起菩提，那这是一个误会。
但路上面呢，讲句生机比生活的还古嘛是的，可惜了嘛，我把这里用不到，讲句生机嘛的真的来用的。但没得我是了，路上面呢，讲句生机嘛的天天嘛来用的，怎么你们去搞什么的？所以这个怎么你们去了地区的，企业的意思，我讲句生讲公平意思。地区的人呢，怎么那么去？当年嘛，我们长久搞的想模型的是，长久或者模型嘛，是吧？那长久是一个了，得送的。
Actually, there are people, therefore, there's this explanation, therefore, that without study, in other words, without understanding what bodhicitta is all about, one cannot generate bodhicitta. So some people may get angry when you say that without understanding of bodhicitta, that you can't generate it. But actually, this is not too bad. It's actually, if you think about what His Holiness once said, like His Holiness was once told when he was in the West, so Vishnu saying it was probably while His Holiness was in the West, that someone approached him and said to His Holiness, I always meditate on bodhicitta. I just meditate on bodhicitta, that's all I do. And His Holiness' response was, well, without meditating on emptiness, how do you understand what enlightenment actually refers to? So without understanding what emptiness refers to, how can you know what enlightenment is and aspire to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings?
So
I will say a few words now to those who studied the scriptures. So before, when I was in the class on bodhicitta, when we studied the topic bodhicitta, or the generation of the mind, we were all thinking, oh, bodhicitta is really great, it's such an amazing state. So we understood the nature of bodhicitta, the categories of bodhicitta, what is the measure of its cultivation, and so forth. So some say it is easy to understand bodhicitta, but it is difficult to make it arise, it is difficult to generate it in one's own continuum.
Any Kapshiva ladies and any solemn time the Namza Johatogres, Namza Joas and Kazanamaja in Jesus Gombares, that did lower the lay Maro. But Solomatogon, Gongor Mato, Magombachi, Changism to see whether Namaja in Jesus or lower to store in Ayomaro. She said that 디다 뒤전에 그게 전주 뒷부 장수들이다 남의 자주 자손도 고음네 전주 뒷부 장단 뒤로 왔다.
So actually when we then studied the fourth chapter of the Abhisamalaya Alankara, so then we were explained that, we learned that when we accumulate the path of, when we generate the path of accumulation and the path of preparation, then what one generates is the training, the complete training. One generates the awareness that's called the complete training, which is basically meditating on the aspects, the 170 aspects of the three wisdoms, the three types of wisdom. So therefore, that means that on the path of seeing, in order for the path of seeing to arise in one's continuum, one needs to meditate first. So one needs to meditate first on these aspects, and one needs to understand them. So it's not that at some point when one thinks of bodhicitta, one tries to or meditates on bodhicitta, and right away one generates the path of accumulation, and therefore these 173 aspects of the three wisdoms arise naturally. It's not like that. So therefore, when practicing previously, so generating the aspirations for the benefit of others, generating the aspirations for enlightenment, that means meditating on those aspirations. Then one is slowly generating the aspects of these 173 aspects of the three types of wisdom. So it doesn't come naturally. So this is something not easy, basically. So the idea is that these 173 aspects are not easy to generate, cultivate, which means that bodhicitta is difficult to generate.
제자다 되네 이 람ring 따용도 전에 답변은 알링을 라바치 다바이나 남진 차생을 참에 된거 돌라 편지를 산제 주버셔스 된디도 별레라보다 좋아수 좋아지 줄로 소베다 좋아티 탐제 디게의 팬비치를 쓰려고라 디게의 팬비치를 쓰에 삼로디 그 제와지 개고 내가 제와지에 답시 제고 제와지에 세비체라 콘솔을 편도리 가르래 콘솔 내공 연송의 탈에 디체다 타바탑에 디체다 나 산제 된디기 콜라다 강에 가리가리 유메 콜라디기 가리가리 에는 고구 유메 디남샤직 신고도 돌라 펜치를 신의 삼로디 리그로
So likewise in the Lamrim, to say it in the Lamrim teaching, so in the text you find here just giving a kind of rough, giving a rough kind of explanation. It says, may I attain the state of the Buddha in order to be of benefit towards all sent or be able to benefit all migrating beings. So here the question that arises is, what are these migrating beings? What are these sentient beings? Who are they? So the different types of realms, the 6 types of realms and so forth, understanding those. And then in order to benefit them, so one needs to generate love, one needs to generate kind-heartedness, love for these sentient beings, and benefit them in what way? So to benefit them by protecting them from the lower realms, taking them to liberation, taking them to Buddhahood and so forth. So what is that kind of benefit? What kind of benefit, what is the kind of benefit, what does that actually consist of? What does that comprise of? What kind of benefit do I wish, what kind of benefit do I wish to give to sentient beings? All that needs to be understood.
这样才是真正了解所谓的为利众生这四个字。
진에 산제 주버 쇼스데 네 산제 세디 컨트치데 시규어 산제 라다 인데 카리카리 유메 디게디 셴고로 산제스 졸라 펜치르 산제라도 산제나 심제나 컨트치 펜도고 디 셴고로 신에 졸라 펜치르 산제스 다 디다 사위체네 주버 쇼 라바라 다 틴디기 산제디 마 타투고르 투구마레 아니 컨트치 타투고레스 저 디차상 삼당인데 아니 신의 산제 윤대 송샤주 슝디기들의 심제단지 산지룸 뭐 주베기다 리기 남샤데 디차상 제 삼도 땅네 아니 산지세의 지시절의 시바 지타도 아니 소설 터지 여봐 딱 거기 남들 유니바기 딱 경쟁이 돈에 삼당이나 방법도 유비 주지 최근지 친구 유비 주지 인지 친구 공부 타면도 배워 디차상 삼도 땅네 레고디 아니 디 답을 용 거는 아니 남제 우마 파지 되게 지점기 야구심이 저기 애니시네 졸라편지상 유튜브로 쇼스에 비타를 줘야지도
So with respect to then saying, may I attain the state of a Buddha? Well, one needs to understand what are the qualities of a Buddha. One needs to understand what does that actually mean. And is one really able to benefit all sentient beings? So to benefit all sentient beings, how does one benefit sentient beings? Can one benefit sentient beings? And how does one benefit sentient beings when one becomes a Buddha? And may I attain such a state? Well, first of all, can I attain such a state or not? And if I can attain this, how can I attain such a state? And then understanding that that therefore a Buddha is like a state of Buddhahood. It can be attained. Such are the qualities of a Buddha. And is it possible to become a Buddha? Do we have already what is needed to become a Buddha? So in that sense, one needs to understand Buddha nature. So understanding that it is possible in general to become a Buddha, and that for oneself this is possible. And then when one studies, for example, the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, understanding the eliminations in the continuum of the Buddha, establishing the elimination in the continuum of the Buddha, that it is possible to become liberated, possible to become a Buddha, establishing all that, establishing that great compassion can be enhanced limitlessly, and so forth. So that way, if one has studied, therefore, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, Prajna in other words, if one has studied Madhyamika, if one has studied Pramanavartika and so forth, so in the same way as one has studied, the more one has studied those, so in the same measure, the sentence here, may for the benefit of all sentient beings, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, becomes in equal measure more effective. So the greater one's understanding, the more effective kind of reflecting on that sentence, meditating on that sentence.
제zan타 단다디 접지치르무치기 아니 근데송보다 심제반의 신den시를 연도조비 자주 되려디 파진 용조도 거를 태운 거랬어. 디나로 책디니디나로 근데송보다
So likewise, Chittilaji, he says that these two lines from Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alankara, so for the benefit of other sentient beings, I aspire, one aspires to attain the immaculate pure enlightenment. So that these verses, these two lines, basically encompass the entire teaching.
제산타 원도징이 마송에도 자주 되고 돌텐 계시 신도 되고 돌텐 계시 디송에디 다하스 남샤자마니 봐 무슨 로장디 딘디 장고에 지순고를 마도 다하스 남다 예와좀 순고 말해.
So therefore in the Abhisamaya Alankara, the explanation of, for example, the enlightenment aspiration and the aspiration of wanting to benefit others, so they are kind of short kind of explanation of that, the extensive explanation of these different aspirations. They're not just for sake of training, for the sake of just understanding this, but this is really to get a vast sense, to really understand bodhicitta and to really be able to practice effectively.
제zan타 산제기 8,000나로라 가르치고도세나 자주심생이디 가르레세나 전주심이 죄바다 물론 탐지 뒤비칠 돌때마다 보고스 전주심스는 돌때는 신레스 대바침이 요네 디신다디기 참을 계시는 신레스 어따 딘지순거 제자 딜레 대다디다 지고 제일 무치기 대바침이 맹아 탐지기 내 뒤바스 전주기 셈디 대진기 맹아 참마기 nen가데 전주심스에 되는 수뒤딩이지 제일 무치 도디를 돌텐스라 와선지 송에들라 도다들 태버지 명화 탐지 내뒤와 딘디 고와지 내온데 전주심들도 다 건줄 땡줄 찾아 알로 태트게 지금 예주서와.
So therefore, likewise, when we say bodhicitta, so actually bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, is just abbreviated. It encompasses all the abbreviated teaching, or the abbreviated version of all the teaching. Whereas everything else, all the other kind of Mahayana practices, they are kind of more extensive. They encompass the extensive teaching, or they're the extensive version here. So this is what Lama Tsongkhapa has also said, that therefore bodhicitta encompasses the entire teaching. Bodhicitta encompasses all the teachings. So therefore the abbreviated version is found in bodhicitta itself, and the extensive version refers to the other practices.
它是一个大乘的统摄这样子。那宗喀巴大师他也曾经讲过，他说呢，大乘一切的 应该说菩提心是统摄所有大乘一切的观要。然后这是宗大师他所说的。那所以就这样子，真正有这样上面的这个概念理解之后呢，我们才能够明白，当我们提到菩提心的时候，它其实呢就是所有的甘珠尔跟丹珠尔，所有的佛经论点的统摄。
다 제시도래 다 디나 신지기 아니 그게 조지기 송준디들라 아니 자주리 셈매나 아니 배기 기름도 조림다 가리 겁네 아니 배기 산지에다 아니 슈틱 말이스 어디를 송도
So likewise, so this was just at the side explanation given at the side. And then likewise, Atisha here said in his writings that without bodhicitta, then engaging in the practice of the generation state or the practice of the completion state will not have the necessary force to become a Buddha. Will not be able to provide the necessary force to become a Buddha.
아니 알레타 페지 대샤오면은 뒤와요는 뒤와치기지.
So let's leave it at that, and if you have any questions, I'll answer one or two questions.
그건 뒤와치기가 말이야.
What to do if you have a life wind disturbing? Winds, disturbing winds. What to do if you have?
롱유나 롱스나 하우도 소유나 가르치네야서 달랑 가리네 소롱
这个问题是说，如果有风病或者有疫症，应该怎么办？
또 가산 더 자오르래 소름기에디 그다 수술을 강해지 그시체 강해디 검니 끼고와 다 대대기 하장기 숙친부진이 파게 디유나 공부 당부디 다디 야야야 고메디 참치해 주소로 디 참치해 된다다 공부 당부디 사제표 쿠류 제불로 쿠류디 유나 한 삼로디 야야야 쿠리 숙리 쿠류 차상 제불로 하시는 디 검계의 융화였다. 소는 검계의 융화였다. 당부디.
As explained yesterday, so this is something I've kind of mentioned before, the idea that when we have a problem, so often we then dwell on the problem, in other words, we meditate on that, we familiarize with that. So in order to not again and again think of that, to not again and again reflect on that, so to stop such a problem, it would be a good idea to change the place. I mean, whatever is responsible, so whatever is responsible for this kind of dwelling on the problem, well, we should change the situation, we should change the place, so that when we no longer again and again dwell on the problem, again and again think about it, because that leads to this kind of disturbance of the wind.
디네 계시슈지 디 가르스나 먼저 디 야보도 디 두자도 디 가부용 마용 세셈기 마지세디 치료그 무베기 켄데 지거와 디 마인바 수수 따당을 라레바디 디 원초어 디 수수 삼로 당초지기 켄지기 이내 삼로 당초지기 미지기를 강해체 삼로 당초 현다지 당용디 콜라니 강해마체 어떤 디지디 디게 가리다 템버레스나 그 셈기 마지세디 미긴 경쟁 기자 말이 수수 삼로 당초도 들어와요 그래서 얘도 디 원초어 거래.
And also, something else that is really important is to when we usually in our mind that naturally we have a sense this is good, this is bad, so this makes us happy, this makes us not happy. So external factors do play a role, but mainly it is one's own mind. It comes from one's own mind, one's own attitude. So understanding that the objects out there, they're not really the problem. Why? Because for one person this is a problem, this is something negative, whereas for another person it is not. So it's really like something subjective, it's rather subjective. Being happy or not has to do with the mind. So identifying that is not external as such, because everyone sees it as positive or negative depending on the person. No, but it comes from one's own mind, that is one's own attitude.
다 지용기 전에 다 리젠 단다 란투 말에 다 벽에 딜다 버려 단다 달라는 치모이네라 남는 치모다는 디고다 남는 뒤서는 반제 쇠바 숨기는 동네 당능이 쇠바 송사카도 지어와 다 조기에 디르다 긴 치료기 미기 제유나니 내제의 지면이 쇠바 그도기다 준주다 나네다 뒤서체 긴 치료를 무슨 매바 이나니 동네 당능이 쇠바 그도기 다 삼로 당당 디게디 아니 삼로 소소소소소심을 펜바 나 두팅지 가시시스 가산다반다 시 쇼고 건다니 뭐 디고메레다
So, also as I've explained in the Lamrim panel in the chapter on forbearance or patience, now there's a type of forbearance and type of forbearance that's different. There are three types of patience that one should reflect upon. So one is here of voluntarily taking on suffering. So usually the kind of explanation you find in other scriptures such as the Bodhisattva way of life and so forth, it deals with the patience in the face of attacks by others or harm by others, but then also to take on to reflect upon the differences. So having gone over those, then one should focus on the patience from the point of view of taking on suffering. So then take any kind of any of these points that are made in that section, and kind of meditative steps on the kind of points that are made in that text. You should take some of those points and reflect on them in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Repeatedly reflect on those.
아니 베제 가신 나물을 깽에 넘도 키르면 아세야 되려 어디서로네 단에 삼당다 싱그레
And so also in some other scriptures, you find the explanation of taking obstacles, taking negative conditions or obstructive conditions and transforming them into the path. So these kind of meditations, if you reflect on that, that's also beneficial.
제산다 제산 디게디 나물을 삼당다 그리sun 거에서 같이 소노파에 자와자와 세마기바 용대디 자와자와다 책이긴 공조단데 담에 열어데 자와 투서 디참에 자와 되샤를 도되다.
So basically, therefore, when we should think that when it comes to storm or this kind of disturbance of the winds and being unhappy, so actually, of course, some of the external conditions that can become a trigger for one's unhappiness, but it's mainly attachment and desire that lead to that unhappiness.
에너지 라바이나 파게타 되샤데 되니요와 고고두세지다 고고민두세 니가로는 되샤요레 동네다 잘로르세바다로 대화디 고고두님이 되샤 동네디 고고민두님이 되샤 니가 요거와
So when we talk about desire as attachment, there's two types. One is wanting something, needing something, and the other is not needing something. So in other words, wanting to be free from suffering, that is the kind of attachment of not wanting something, and then wanting happiness is the kind of attachment of wanting something.
다 와르바이나 세마기바 차바이나 근도 나데기요인자 다 만들게도 말로좀 제토고민도 되기 삼로되기 세마기바 리고로다.
So for example, when I get sick, for example, I feel unhappy because I'm sick, because I cannot study.
因为病的原因，所以我没办法学习，这会让他心里不快乐。
딜라디 다 남중기 위규메 삼로다 만다 그래서나 다 나니 캡사 가지요래 뒤에 삼다나 체요래 만나나 경 가리라요 남주디 그래서나 만나나 마티 체투여 베제디 따투여 만나나 마티 체투여서 야가잖냐 삼당 나나 디팅마순 두개 쳐디 삼당 디기는 마지오 차고라 다디 도초기 만나나 마 두자디 용시리 만 두자디 용시기레스 어디서 삼당 나니 원래 캡사디라다 딘디라르 삼당 요르디 어디 땅바이나 도초다다 차트네 핑겨다.
So usually, ordinarily, what happens when, for example, you're sick, at that time, you usually think, oh, what is the harm of me getting sick? And what is the benefit of being better? So one should now take the opposite approach and think, what is the benefit of getting sick? What is the harm or the disadvantage of being healthy? So to kind of turn it around, because usually we think along the opposite line. We think only of, oh, wow, what are all the advantages when I feel good, when I feel healthy? What are the disadvantages when I'm fat, when I'm unwell? So we now turn it around in exactly the opposite side. The opposite side in the sense that, yes, when I'm sick, what is my advantage? How do I benefit from that? And then vice versa, when I'm well, what are the disadvantages? So to think along those lines, to actually turn it around, is really beneficial.
万一我没病的话呢，我就会遇到怎样的不好事，还好我生病。那万一我病了的话呢，那我就会遇到怎样的好事。那现在我遇到了，当我们这样反过来去想的时候呢，那透过生病这个因缘，依旧是可以想到这些好处，那会让我们因此而快乐。
但这什么하게 녀를 제버체 인데 삼단데 빠라지를 양양 담바이나 다 완전히 티샤 삼바 제해든데 용거 디용나 아니 신의 다루로.
So when investigating this first, and then thinking about this again and again, then when one actually gets sick, so upon the sickness, when getting actually sick, one will think that's okay. It's alright, I'm sick, it's okay.
想到后来，你就会突然有一天，你会心里面想说，我生病这样真的是可以啊，真好这样子。那当你有这种想法的时候，你这种因为生病的不快乐就会整个就不见了。
但미세기 도나 제지라 디지요레 그래서 디지 상당한 신능이지나 아니 상로 숙청부 바지 숙청부 레디 디 규견의 수수기 제주 제투바 인장 딜라는 바기 다시 돌링 제투그래 디 상당의 모텔 내라고요 다 딘디마 이버지 충종 디딜레요 수수 하마 거지 엔페나 다 프로버티지 데 샤가주디스네 마 두스 제조나 semna majibte chilere ta dila ane nangme tangche odi sa dini majibo chungchung di sa ane nima sumshi chela deme kume majibo le de yachi di le de ta gyungzen ha guwa ma ta gyungzen ha ma godi ane sam pejana samdaye di phage ta tasila ma sun tang tu guwa ma chesa diziri di tingshe tenche ane tes di ma risuna la majibo de rina khaya dini jila khari yaris
So something else to pay attention to is like saying that, when there's a great problem, so how to think about it, we actually know when there's a great difficulty, a great problem, we can usually look at the causes and conditions that give rise to that problem, we can examine those, and then identify how the problem arose, what we can do about it. So we are able to deal with the problem when it's a great problem. So the difficulty is with little problems, that we don't pay attention to the little ones. So let's say, for example, I put a cup on my table, but then it falls over and falls on the ground. So I kind of ignore that problem. There's a little bit of unhappiness, I'm not really well, but I ignore it. I don't really think about it and pay any attention to it. And that collects, that kind of comes together. It comes together, these little problems collect together, and then after a day or two, I feel suddenly unhappy. It's actually just all these little difficulties, these little problems and unpleasant kind of situations that now come together, gather together, and I feel unhappy. So in that moment, I'm not able to identify what the problem is. So the kind of reasonings that are presented in the scriptures that allow me to kind of debate or investigate and analyze, that doesn't work in that moment because I don't really understand what is happening, what is the problem, what's the reason for the problem. So Krishna is saying that therefore when little problems arise, even little ones, so let's say the cup falls over, to not just allow the feeling of not being well to just arise and then ignore it, but rather think, it doesn't matter, it's just a cup. That's not a problem, who cares, right? So actually have that thought and to deal with the problem right away, otherwise it may gather, it will come together, and a big problem may arise.
Rāngā sū kīngō tu sū tā shirā yō mā tā lō shīng shīng nī yō rō tī bā tē sī rē chē ā mī kī rī tā mī tā sī chī lā mā yō sām chē nā 디니지를 가리어서 딜 떼스 망제 그래서 저 찐 남매 차로 다디 배체로 왔다 배체로 또 신다 상마도 그들 가리어를 나는 그 요말이 다 아니 디니 말하나 아니 충분히 친구 써야지 무슨 뭐 되지
So for example, when you're young and your clothes are a little torn, you may get really worried. He's saying, oh, for us older people, it doesn't really matter. But when you're a little younger and your clothes are torn and you're like, what would people think? What are they gonna, how are they gonna react? You should just tear it even further and then go out. So you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Who cares? But really, instead, it doesn't matter. It really is not important. So then your mind can actually deal with this problem just to punch from right away and it's like,
在当下你就可以告诉自己，这有什么关系的事情，就在当下解决掉，不要让这种小小的事情造成你后来的大大的不快乐。
我觉得不能解决，就叫俺们没办法，不能这样子。